And ready or you're up. Okay, so welcome back to another episode of the Manchester SEO podcast. Today we have Alex Moore with us, who runs a company called Gritstone Strategy.
It is.
Yeah,
That's James.
yeah. What do you do?
What do I do? Sit down there.
That's a question.
Yeah, no. Well, firstly, thanks very much for having me on the show, the podcast show.
Yeah.
Very honoured. Very honoured. It's funny how you come back after university 20 odd years later.
Yeah.
And it's fine that So Gritstone Strategy is a relatively new thing. It's what I would call a strategic communications, which is effectively like reputation management.
Okay.
Company. I spent probably over 20 years now working in different, you might say, silos of communication, political or media relations and stuff like that. And I've done it mostly in London, as you do, from different sorts of companies, and I've launched it in Yorkshire, across the other side, where I now live, and looking to grow the business there. But I think reputation management, strategic communications is effectively protecting and enhancing the reputation of an organisation or a person. It really depends.
So, well, we obviously know each other from the past. And
Better cricketer than I ever was.
well, I wouldn't say that. But there's quite a funny story, obviously, around how we connected on LinkedIn initially, and how we're at a cricket game in Barbados. Like you do, and I thought I recognised that person, and turns out we're at the same university, and we knew the same people, and connected, and then somehow wind round, and then you come together again, and it's great to have someone on that with that kind of story. But how do you go from? Well, first of all, so we're obviously Aberystwyth University together. What did you study there? I don't know.
So the full title, which I never go into, because I always think it sounds a bit wanky to be fair, is I always like to study politics. It just seems easier, but it was actually international politics and intelligence studies. And so Aberystwyth was known for certain things. One of them is its School of International Politics. It's quite old. And
that's in the top 3 in the world, isn't it?
It was then. Well, if they let me in, it might not be true. But so big for international politics, and they also had other fields of expertise. And one of them is effectively the history of intelligence and spies and stuff. It's quite good for that, and it's more the history and the tradecraft and how that works. So it was quite fascinating actually. And they look at it about how that coincides with world events and things like that. So that's what I studied at ABBA.
And then, so did you always have an idea of going into communications, PR, comms? How did that happen?
Not really. I think I was probably that stereotypical person who was just, the older I got, the better I got at sort of thinking, what do I not like? And so I won't do that. And what am I not good at? Quite a lot, so I won't do that. The science was always a thing. Although the irony is my degree is actually a science degree, which I never always got chuffed of, even though I've barely got a GCSE in chemistry. So I did the degree, and I don't know. I played with a few things about what to do, politics or get into politics, because obviously I was interested in it. But after Aberystwyth, actually, I in that sort of a mad dash for it, I actually went and did a master's. I applied to do a master's. And applied to 2 places, and I went to, I actually asked for the information from 2 places, and the one who sent it to me rather than emailing me was the one I applied to. So there were only 2, and so I went to Leeds, the University of Leeds, I should be clear about, Leeds, as they say, and did a master's in modern history, which I didn't realise at the time is that it can be anything from 1750 onwards is modern, but I stuck to my roots and only explored 20th century. And actually, I think it was probably, looking back, probably started the way, not to say the making of me, but it really made me realise that you can do it on your own a bit, quite being self-sufficient, and because it was bloody hard, to be frank, and but also it was a subject I enjoyed, which helped. And you got to choose that. And so for that year I lived, funny enough, with Max in Leeds, because he did a similar masters as well.
Yeah.
Really loved it and enjoyed it. And I think when I look back, when I was applying for jobs or doing that thing, you're 21, 22, in London as it would be, having a master's made you stand out a bit more. Now, everybody's got a master's. So back then it was actually probably quite useful to have done that.
So what was your first kind of involvement in this game?
So I, like a lot of people, finished my degree and then actually did an internship at a sort of quite a big PR company.
Right.
Well, they did everything. And there's, in the world of communications, there's the field of what they call public affairs, which is effectively political lobbying, political engagement. And so I did a 4-month internship there. And I have to say, I loved it. It was brilliant fun. It made probably by the people that I worked with at the time.
Yeah.
And I treated it as that. I, played the ball as it came rather than trying to think long term.
Right.
But if you keep your head down, work reasonably hard, and good things will come. And actually, I remember the day before I was due to leave, I asked one senior guy who happened to have been quite, I think he was like political editor of the Sunday Times. I didn't do much work with him. And I said to him, look, he said, I hear you're going. What are you doing? I said, well, I'm just applying for jobs.
Yeah.
And now it's just going to, and I've always been on politics in the centre right. And it just so happened he knew someone in the Conservative Party. There was a job going. I had to apply for it, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
And applied for it, copious of interviews later, and I got a job working for the Conservative Party in their sort of research and media team.
Sliding doors moment.
It was in a way, but, I look back at it now, and I remember going into my first day there, it was a sea of people, some of which are MPs, some of them went on to bigger and better things in government. And I look back and I thought, having gone to prestigious Aberystwyth and Leeds University, I was in a minority. Because there were a lot of them who basically went to Oxford or Cambridge and stuff. But yeah, it was a slightly surreal world in that game. Enjoyed it, but I quickly learned after sort of a year or two that even though you enjoy politics, it really wasn't for me in a career.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy the sort of, it taught me a lot doing it for a few years, and understanding how the system works, how Parliament, how politicians, and actually, I would say in a really positive way, made me realise that there are some good people in politics. It's too easy to say, oh, he or she's a shit, and etc.
Yeah.
But actually, I was very fortunate to work with a guy called David Lidington, who actually went on to become Deputy Prime Minister.
Right.
And he was just a very decent man.
Yeah.
Very decent human being. And by the way, I'd say that in any politics, Labour, Lib Dem, whatever, there are good people everywhere. So sort of reaffirmed my faith more in some politicians rather than all.
Yeah.
And so what that meant is that when you leave that game, the political lobbying world, which I'd done internship, I sort of naturally drifted into it, as a lot of people do. And I did that for about 5 or 6 years. Learned the tradecraft, so to speak, which, as one city bloke once said to me, public affairs is just basically letter writing.
Yeah.
And effectively you're representing companies, organisations, trade bodies, people, normally when there is a problem, when they want to try and change something or have a better reputation in order to change something. And so understanding who the right MPs are, who's working in government, how Parliament works, and then coming up with a political strategy to reach their goals.
For someone that's not completely aware of, well, I mean, I hear about political lobbyists and lobbying, and I thought, thinking about it last night, thinking, what the hell's that? Yeah, well, what does that mean? What do they do? Why would you need a lobbyist?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I think people always remember the old cash for question days. I'm showing my age now, but with brown envelopes of money and getting people to raise questions. And it's changed a bit. It still needs to be reformed and changed. But effectively, imagine you're a big organisation, a big company investing in the UK. That could be in oil and gas or healthcare or whatever it is. There is going to be regulation or things that impact your business day to day. So be that consultations at work or even a supermarket's always the good example. They have to think about planning regulations, they have to think about food safety, food labelling, pensions, national insurance, tax, all those things are dealt with by government.
Yeah.
And so for something like a supermarket chain, they need to be, one, understanding what the debate is within those political circles, but also then what are the top issues that really impact their bottom line and their reputation. So if it is about the national insurance increase, what would they have done about it? Or probably a better one is planning regulations or business rates, because that really impacts their business. Because if they make fair representation, if they're telling government, we Mr. Big Supermarket have a problem with some of this legislation change because not only will it impact us financially, there's going to be a cause and effect with some of our employees, some of our logistics, supply chain, and actually in its best form, lobbying is about representing a different truth, I would say, to the political classes. It's saying to them, what you think isn't necessarily wrong, but by taking the action you're doing, you're going to impact all these different people over here. So it's not just when big companies do it, with the greatest will in the world, they're doing it honestly, but the impact it has in the broader sense. So a good example with the farming inheritance tax thing. All the big supermarkets have come out in support of the farmers because they know that actually, one, they need to be seen being aligned to the farmers, but two, that's where they get most of their products from. So lobbying in the best way is about making fair representation to the political classes about what changes could possibly have a bad impact or actually could have a good impact. So by saying we want to change this regulation or changing the law means that actually frees us up to invest more. So lots of businesses, organisations do it in order to make those cases.
You were in-house for the government or the party at the time. How does that change from?
So when I worked for the
was that in a similar role?
No. So what happens is when I work for the Conservative Party, you're literally just working for them. But when you leave, there are all these big PR communications agencies or public affairs agencies that effectively are there with ex-political advisors, ex-journalists, the sort, who will be employed by big companies or trade bodies to help them put together the right political communication strategy to meet their objectives. And the reason why they tend to employ ex-political advisors, and you'll see them everywhere with the big companies, is because they understand the lay of the land. They're also connected, which is important, because they know the characters involved in certain political parties and can make the case in a better way. So that's when you work in the agency world, as it's called, if that's what you're trying to do, to shape the agenda. Now, lobbying has a bad reputation to some extent because anyone can lobby. And some organisations which might not have a great reputation will lobby, and that's just part of democracy.
When you were going in there, thinking about that time as slightly wet under the collar still as a young lad, and then going into this big wide world of some amazing characters and leaders and influential people. Do you think back to that and go, Jesus, what? That was a proper slap in the face of reality.
I mean,
the real world's like.
100%, and probably naive, probably immature, of probably myself, but also of how things work. I've always, been a bit gung ho and stuff, but I think particularly when you work in the political party, you've got to really love it. You've got to really love it and want it. And I was just like, I really enjoyed it. And I still love politics. I'm still interested. But I'm not going to die in a ditch over like some of them would, and just completely, faithfuls.
Yeah.
You have your own values, and some things you'll agree with and some things you won't, regardless of political parties. But I think when you're working, as I did for some cracking organisations, you've got to understand the internal politics of big companies. This regulation, if we change the regulation about how it is running a certain industry, it'll save them £20 million a year.
Yeah.
So the money they pay to the lobbyists or the political advisors to make that case, which may seem a lot, is small fry compared to £20 million savings. Because when you make those savings, especially if they're a listed company, which we used to work for, they will make that case to investors.
Yeah.
They need to, chief executives or whoever it is, being aware of their environment and the ecosystem means that they can then say, well, actually, we're dealing with that because the analysts and investors will know what's going on.
Yeah.
And so it means that they're showing that they're proactive and forward thinking. So as a young 20-something person doing it and going around and meeting people and working with other politicos from all all walks of life and political thing, it's for me, it was that sort of meeting other people and learning the ropes. I think the other way I would call it is political lobbying and reputation is a bit like trench warfare. It's attritional. It takes time. You've got to keep going at it and keep going away, because to enhance a reputation will take time. And I think it can be destroyed very quickly, as we can see in the press. Pick the example.
Yeah.
So no, it was a. I wouldn't. There were ups and downs, as there always is, but certainly learned a lot.
Yeah. So many questions.
You ask away.
Well, I suppose I'm interested in how the things you learned from that about the world and life and what kind of influential people in your life that you learn a lot from. Because it is a kind of boiling pot of all sorts of information and glitz, and then hard work, and then and emotion and teamwork and being in central London as well, and that, and the importance of it all. Is there anything you look back on?
Yeah. No. It's just be a really good question. I think I look back probably on all those things, those times, and learned a lot about human beings. Actually, politics. They were talking about that ferocious environment, and it is pretty nasty.
Yeah.
And even in the agency world, it's pretty ferocious. People can be shits, to be frank.
Yeah.
Let's do the negatives. We'll move on to the positives. Yeah, probably a nice way. But yeah, it is pretty ferocious, and people will say and do things like, God Almighty. We couldn't get away with it nowadays. But I mean, first I worked in the office, people were smoking.
Yeah.
And I was like, yes. Anyway, sorry. Joking. So I think the politics of the office environment, the politics of big companies, the interaction with people has stayed with me forever. And I think as I look now as youngsters in our mid-40s, one thing that stayed with me is actually when I think about how we used to act then and how probably I acted as well, quite hard, focus on the plan, strategy first, and we'll get through this. We've got to do this, we've got to do that. Because that,
the object.
Because that was the, reputations, your own reputation, the reputation of the company, particularly when I worked in the city. Brilliant at networking. Those people were brilliant at networking. Was quite, forthright environment. And I think I took away from that is that actually when I look back on the good people that I've worked with, some of the outstanding people, decent human beings, they are just that. They're just decent human beings. They're not shits. And I think actually, as I reflected, started my own company and talked about the values and all those things, that I've probably been a bit, looking back over the years, probably should have been a bit more emotionally mature enough to sort of realise actually it's okay to be your own person, or you don't have to act like that. But you can change that. And I think when I look at those people, particularly some who are in the media and stuff, just decent human beings. I was fortunate to work with a guy called Linton Crosby, and even got knighted for his efforts. Now, if you Google him, you'll find out a range of things are said about him. But my second child was born, and he had, unbeknownst to us, a rare condition. Still has it to this day, you wouldn't know, but with his esophagus, and it's called an OAT, TOF. And so we had to move up to King. We lived in Kent then. We had to go up to King's. Operation. It's quite intense. And I was working for Linton's company at the time, and he was the first person on the phone. That sort of straight to the point Australian, straight to the point. Don't worry. I almost want to do the Australian accent. I probably won't do it justice, but don't worry about it. Take your time, mate. Don't worry about it, mate. Focus on your family. That he said everything you needed to hear. And so for me, I will always look back on that with thankful hands. It reassures you that you're not worrying about returning to work or anything like that. Take your time. And I learned a lot. And I think about those other people who I probably always look to those people who are probably a bit more characterful and not boring. Better to be mint chopped chip than vanilla, I would say. That stand out, but also have a decency in terms of how they conduct themselves, how probably turn the other cheek in a way, which actually takes a stronger mentality than to react, I think. And so I look back and I think they're the people that I learnt a lot from over the years, particularly in the working environment. But I think, it's a bit like anything, a bit like getting in the nets and practicing. Sorry to use cricket analogies here, but
it's welcome.
Better to be out in the nets than out in the middle. And so it's practice, isn't it? It's practice, particularly in communications, I think, and reputation. It's one of those industries, I would say, thinking about this, is that your experience and expertise comes with time. It's
learning from other situations.
You're learning from situations, you're learning from people. Not every situation is the same, but there will be striking similarities. Whether that be a crisis situation or whatever. And so understanding it, because I'd worked in politics or in the city or other environments, it means that you can sort of think, well, hang on a sec, I know where stakeholders are going to react to things.
So reputation management. Tell me more.
Well, I think that's what
I was going to say, what's it all about? It's pretty obvious,
it's about protecting or enhancing a reputation. It's about, normally people tend to think about the reputation stuff when I've been, having recently started my company and meeting lots of different businesses. People tend to think about it when there's a problem, whether it be a company or small or family owned, whatever. They think of a problem has arisen. And they tend to be one of two problems. It's a surprise, which is never a good problem to have, or it's coming.
You've just been waiting for it.
And so how you react will have a fundamental impact on your reputation. Now, the point is that if you're a well-known person or brand, or whoever that is, if it's a surprise, then you don't have long to react. To protect that reputation, particularly if you're at fault or someone's accusing you of something. If you have time, i.e. it's coming, then you can prepare. But I would say the reason why companies or individuals employ people like myself or other, the big, because they tend to be in London, to be honest, because it's understanding, I would say, is one of the fundamentals of protect or enhancing reputation, but also what the ecosystem and where you operate, who are the other stakeholders, actors, audiences that have an interest in potentially responding. So that means if it's in the public domain and you've done something naughty or, well, definitely the media or probably the Daily Mail will be on it like a rash. But the media will be onto it. Well, that means you need to say, what are you going to say to the media about it? If it's really contentious, and God forbid the politicians get involved, then they'll want to know, or the regulator, if you're a business, or charities or community groups, particularly if you're giving money to them, well, they want to be associated with your brand. And I even thought about employees, sorry. And so the reason why reputation management and strategic communications is because you're thinking about what is it you need to do now, but also it's having one eye on the timeline going forward about who else is going to be interested. You know, your competitors, people who don't like you. Well, it would be it's James. You know, how do you react to that in order to protect it? And so that's why you tend to come to people like me or other companies in order to advise appropriately. Because also, let's not forget, it's very rare, really. There are going to be big problems, particularly when it's a family-run business or individuals who have made a bit of a name for themselves. Having a sudden problem, that doesn't matter. But as I said, we said earlier, you can always pick those moments when reputations will be absolutely destroyed. You know, I think it's I'm sorry, I'm going to be Pontian quote Shakespeare, but I think there's something in Othello where, you know, they say reputation. It's sort of, you know, months, years to build and seconds to destroy. And so if you don't get it right, and there's a few things you just have to do right, but there's also, you've got to be flexible and maintain as well a certain core belief in what you're saying. Otherwise, you'll come unstuck. I mean, it's probably a lot to unpack there, but particularly in a crisis situation.
It's a bit like scoring 100 in cricket.
Never known it, mate. Never got there.
So it takes quite a long time to get to. There's lots of skill sets and different things to appreciate, but you can ruin it with one decision, with one ball.
Exactly.
It's all gone.
100%, and which has led me to think of the great Mike Atherton, Lord Atherton, no less. In his book, he's like, you just take your time. You think about the next ball. Survive, set yourself a goal, and survive the session.
Well, actually, we've spoken about this in the past. In a cafe in Huddersfield, it was of all the places.
Brilliant.
And we were talking about, you know, maybe going viral on social media, what that means, and then you know, it's always that thing with life or running a business where you go, whatever's happened, there's always tomorrow, and it'll all be fine, and you know, keep breathing. Does that bringing a reality to what people are feeling at the time, which might be the whole world's ending? It's just some guy got 20,000 comments from this, tagged me in on this thing, and it's me swearing at a waitress or something like that, or whatever it could be, and bringing reality to it. I think it's quite interesting being old enough to remember when there was no social media. It was sort of coming into it. It's one of those things. It's just lovely, isn't it?
simpler times.
Yes.
It's one of the things that social media is just, it is a fundamental part of the fabric of your reputation. I think the one thing I always think about social media is like, if anyone's trying to enhance their reputation, you know, build up a better reputation within their field, you look at law firms, they do lots of different stuff. They'll put out press releases, they'll do briefings, they'll do endless events. That's all about projecting that sense of we know what we're talking about and we're the stars in our field. Fantastic. And then, but you also have to have, I think, all the different channels. I've got to have an Instagram or Tickety Talk or all these other things. So you have to do.
You call it Tic Tac the other day.
And so it's just part of. I'll try and be serious, but I think a lot of the time people just think you just got to do it. You got to do all of it. And yes and no is the answer. It's like what do you do as a business, and what do you do as a business, and who are the customers that you need to reach? If they are, in the primary, in the sense of, established, using that lawyer as an example, established business owners would tend to be high profile or reasonably high profile professional industries. Is TikTok the right channel? I would probably, my gut would tell me no. But should you have a LinkedIn? Of course you should. You know, should you do things on Instagram? But why would you do things on Instagram? I would probably only highlight things like, you know, the work you do for, you know, in charitable centre, or the ethos and the culture of the business, because it tends to be more photo related. And so it's just about what is the right channel to communicate the right thing about you. And I think when people see it in the reverse, in that what we call crisis situation, to your point, you know, when people say in the media, because also the media use social media as like a barometer test, because you see it on TV and they go, well, it's all over social media. Because
it wasn't because they put it
because they signposted it to the order. and I think, yes, it is, you know, there are thousands of people on there commenting and tweeting or Xing, whatever it's called now. And yes, it is. But sometimes, and it's easier for me to say this, have a bit of a sense check. You know, when someone says, well, it's all over social media, what are they talking about? Is there something, you know, what do they mean by that? And what is the subject matter? Because if it's something really distinctive, I'm trying not to be contentious, but yeah, something really distinctive that not many people know something about, then if you look at, for example, Twitter or X, how many people are actually on it? And I think if you look at the latest figures, it's something like, you know, 20 to the early 20s, millions of people have a Twitter account, but they don't all use it. They actually don't. They just have it because they probably just did it one day. Of that 20 million, probably only 20% are active, i.e. they may look at it once or twice a week or something like that. And active is quite a broad range there. And of those, that 20% of that, trying to do my maths now, I think 5 million, whatever, you know, 4 million, people, 20% of that 4 million are actually using it every day, like on it. And most of those people, again, are only using it to see information rather to contribute to information. I think there's some bit of data that says, you know, 90% of content on US Twitter was 10% to the people. And so don't forget, something like Twitter is a pointer, it's a direction finder. So when you're looking at those things saying it's all kicking off, yes, it may be 30,000 people, but if it's about, I don't know, you know, farming machinery or something like that, it's all kicking off there, they'll tend to be all people who want to understand that and read it. So it's not to say that it doesn't matter, but it's about putting it in context and being proportionate about it. If it's, you know, BBC News at 10 reporting on it, I would say that's fundamentally more important. Because that, where it's beamed out, when it's all over the media, that will be more important. So it's about thinking about social media in a slightly more proportionate way. It's not saying it doesn't count. But yes, it's kicking off. And I would say, what is the conversation those people are having? If they all don't like you, it's a bit like I think we talked about, you know, football. If I'm a Man City fan and you're Man United and I try and convince you should join my team, you'll tell me to F off. And it's a bit like that in social media. There are going to be people there who just don't disagree. So going back to that point about being in a crisis, you're not going to convert them. So you just need to rebut them. So you probably put something on Twitter, so this is the line.
It's a great way of seeing who your supporters are as well, isn't it?
I think that's the point. That's what, that is the fundamental. You know, there are only, the thing I've learned over the years, there are only 3 types of audiences: supporters, neutrals, and antis. And the supporters are the ones you just need to motivate to state a goodwill on social media, to like using the analogy. The antis, well, they're going to say nasty things or not like you anyway. But that great big chunk in the middle of neutrals are the ones you need to persuade. And so,
how do you do that?
And all those stakeholders we talked about before, be it the media or politicians, they won't. Yeah, all the media won't just sit in the supporters column. It will be disparate. It will be all over that, and the same with all the others. So that strategic communications element is about understanding where those people are, why they're there, what they think and why, and how you can try and shape that.
Yeah.
And so in that crisis situation when things are going wrong, a surprise element, it's about understanding where all those people sit and advising that company or person on what is the best thing to say at this moment in time.
Yeah.
Because in that moment, if it's really, really bad, it's about survival, or it's about saying, actually, no, this didn't happen, or whatever it is, but it's about being true to yourself, and we'll take the next ball when it comes. So,
Just call their fake news or something.
I think someone's been doing it.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Don't catch on, you know.
That's amazing. I mean, so if you had a business that had always been very good, but they were let down by a supplier,
Yeah.
and that meant no deliveries were made with your product to your customers over Christmas, like a really important time, and you let everyone down, thousands and thousands of regular clients. That's probably a good time to give you a call and see what they issue, you know.
Well, in the greater world of politics, owning it, and take control of the narrative, which is that in that situation, you know it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So it's about saying, what is the situation? Can we change it? If it's a no, and we're going to fail, you know, to your point, the analogy, therefore, we need to be on the front foot. How are we going to communicate this? What's the best way to do that? To customers, to intern. Don't forget, it's more than just customers. It's going to be lots of other different people. Do you proactively tell the media or not?
Yeah.
Is it a product? You know, having worked in pharmaceuticals, is it, you know, medicine? That would be very, well, you have to be proactive. If it's a toy or something like that, you're talking about crying kids on TV. So you've got to be as proactive as you can, and enable all those channels to have feedback. But you've got to be proactive. You've got to own it, because when it does go live or public domain, you've got to be able to demonstrate you have done everything within your power to explain. You've said, this is the situation, this is what we're doing, and this is what's going to be happening for the next few days. So we'll either refund you or hold it and get the next toy to you as soon as possible, but we're really sorry. And then you're demonstrating, obviously people aren't going to be happy, but the point is they're informed. And so in that sort of crisis situation, you've got an element of planning and control, but also planning for the worst case scenario. Because it might go belly up and things might go wrong, or a toy does turn up, or whatever, you know, and that could cause more problems.
So I before what we do now, I worked within software companies. And it's very client facing. My thing was, because client retention and getting more out of them than just what they were spending at that time. So it's about developing that. A lot of that came through honesty, and I was brought into a business because they were struggling with clients. They were like they were going to leave, and they was like, one of them was paying 25 million over 5 years, and it's a lot of money to lose. And what I found was that no one was communicating with them because they were angry at it not working, but they were like, well, we can't update or fix that version you're on. You have to, you're 12 versions behind the current one. But there's a cost involved. And what I found was, if you're honest with them and say, this is where we're at, this is the situation, this is the reality of what's happened. I can't change what's been said in the past, but let's look at these, let's look at the options available, and we'll select a way forward, and then we'll go from there. And it's amazing how reasonable human beings are. Just because you give a bit of clarity and a bit of honesty and a strategy moving forward, how they just calm down and go, right, okay, let's do it. And if you ignore people, or if you think it's going to go away, bury your head in the sand. That's the analogy, isn't it? That it just gets worse. And it's worse. People make up their own ideas and their own thoughts.
I agree. I think it's really interesting when in the previous life, when companies do think that they're only legally obligated to do. I think that's the problem.
Right.
Because yes, it may only require that they legally, give your money back in 30 days or something, or X, Y, and Z. But if it's Christmas, you can go back to the example Christmas time, and people need that money. Could you not get it quicker? could you not change that? And I think that's when, particularly in those big companies and the politics and stuff comes to account when, because actually it will cost them money.
Yeah.
But then I think that's when communications advice come in and say, well, look, you can do that, but now you're going to risk your reputation, your name, your brand, your identity by being seen as actually against the identity, the values that you hold dear, because now you're saying, oh, solid, so, they can wait 30 days, because that's all we have to do. And I think that's when, to your point, honesty and actually going the extra mile for customers or clients, whoever that might be, is actually what you should be doing in those situations. On the way here, people talk about the Marks and Spencers and how all the problems they're having, but actually the value, the share price is it's all right, it's up and down a bit, but it's not too bad. And actually, on the Radio 5 Live, people were phoning up saying, actually, I've been into the shops, they could have been more helpful. That's what you want. Even though it is a crisis and there are lots of things going on, it's a moving feast. If you're doing more than you should, I always think that's better.
Yeah. I think it's an opportunity to reconnect with customers.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
I get it. Yeah.
And get more of that relationship with them. Everything's human, and but were you really valuable to us? And here's a voucher or whatever.
Yeah.
Obviously depending on how bad it is, but it's how you, like you say, how you deal with it.
Yeah, 100%. How you deal with it, particularly if it's known about. I think that's when people in that crisis situation, if you knew it was coming and you chose not to go above and beyond, that's when people are less forgiving. Because to your point, if you're just honest and decent, you probably go, oh crumbs, there's an emergency. In your family, you're with a family or a friend, you go, oh, something's happened. I need to better not do that. I've got to, make the effort.
I always remember there's another client I'm having trouble with. I was I'd gone over to supervise an upgrade and of their software, and the guy who managed the whole thing, he came over to me. He said, James, I always feel like we're very negative when we communicate with you. He's he's Finnish guy, so they're very straight to the point.
Yeah.
Scandinavian in that way, and he said we really appreciate the work you've done to make us feel like we're wanted and we matter to the business. And it's amazing how blasé businesses can be with their clients, and it's just like a money figure to, especially private equity as well. It's all about profitability rating, which is important because they want to sell it. But actually, if you forget about the clients and their, what they think about you, you won't have a business.
Yeah, no, true. And actually, you raised a good example. Private equity, to be in defence of private equity, but to be fair, when you look at what some of them are doing, they're looking at investing in a company. Yes, they want to have an exit strategy, but they know actually what are the things that a good company, what makes a good company when you want to sell it. Well, it hasn't got a good reputation. It won't be worth the price that we want. It won't be able to have the customer loyalty. It won't be it links it all together.
Yeah.
So actually, private equity companies, I think, get that.
Right.
Good reputation, good brand identity, how you're talking about things, how you're looking to solve problems in the ecosystem, or albeit if you're a challenger brand, or you're just looking to bring more competition into a sector. They're actually probably more aware of that reputational mantra that just needs to be handled.
Yeah.
So yeah, it can be challenging all the time.
What advice would you give to someone who's looking to get into the reputation and comms world?
It's actually quite surprisingly popular, actually. There's always I think I should have sort of, at the start, we talked about my career, but actually you get lots of different PR agencies, communications people that work in what I would sectors. So there's healthcare PR, or there's consumer PR, or retail PR, or legal PR, you know, and it can get quite, and it's normally just about what I would call traditional press releasing, having a projection image, you know, stereotypical PR type work. Nothing wrong with that, you know, there's what people do, and there's some big sectors for that. I think what is interesting, once you work too long in that sort of PR sector, you can get typecast. And so actually breaking out and having a bit more interest in other areas and doing different things can be challenging. So I would say to somebody that if they're interested in doing communications or PR, think more broadly than just being that press release and social media type, you know, the projecting stuff. There are other parts of, I would say, the communications fields, like corporate and financial PR, which might sound quite dry and business pages, but actually there's an awful lot of businesses out there on the UK markets that have to report information, you know, whether it be the results or changes in directors and stuff. That's important too, because you get to understand the finances of a business. You get to see what makes them tick. And so that also means that when you look at that in terms of a corporate, it's about the people running the business. What are the decisions they're making? What is a good business? What's a bad business? What does EBITDA stand for? Now, I'm joking, but you know, it's that broadening one's horizons. Maybe doing some, you know, public affairs work, because actually just working in one sector or one field of, I would call that traditional PR, is fine. If that's what we want to do, great. But having a broader sense of how these things are all connected, because you will come across the political person or the corporate or the financial person, and actually it's striking how there's overlap. And I think if you want to grow and develop and be a better PR person, I did it by chance, you might say. That the opportunity came up, and I was quite interested in corporate and city work, so I did it. And I think, you know, I never look back, it was brilliant. I mean, it was a tough environment, but it was good fun at the same time. And so I would say to people, if you're going to do it, great, but keep an eye out about what other areas of communication you could work in, be that political or corporate, financial or charitable sector, whatever that might be, or getting better at like social media, which will only be a bigger thing with AI and stuff. So yeah, think more broadly about how you can enhance your own career and expertise, because I think it will stand you in better stead in the long run.
What are the challenges in your industry?
Our own reputation. Our own industry reputation. Oh God.
Like technology's like crazy, isn't it? And keeping a reputation on so many platforms and in real life.
I was thinking about this actually, because it's a tough one. Because a lot of the time, you know, what are you trying to be? What are the benefits? You're trying to be almost like that consigliere in a lot of the mafia film to the mafia boss. You're trying to be the advisor of that reputation, and you're trying to be that objective friend. You see what I mean? You're a friend who can be honest with you. Or someone trusted advisor. And I think that a lot of my experience, I think it's quite easy to see a lot of bullshit, to be frank. A lot of people who just say, yeah, that's very important. Very important. Yeah, we'll handle it. And you're like, well, what are you going to do? You can't, you know, big promises, not much return. Because a bit like, I always think of the quote from my father, you know, never talk about politics and religion with a girl on the first date out. Never do it, because you're going to go down a rabbit hole and it won't be good. And actually it's true, because they're quite emotive subjects. And I think that for people who work in PR, I think you're unable, if you've got a bit of chat, you can get away with it. Because it is about having that bravado to have that presence in a room, say no to the boss man. That's the wrong decision. And let me tell you why. It takes character, and some people do it. I've seen people do it amazingly well, but then I wouldn't trust them with looking after my children, to be frank. But they're able to survive because they have a sense of bravado. So I think what I'm trying to say is that my challenge is there's some of those types of people in the industry who probably not all they're cracked up to be, but can survive because they have their own personal hubris to keep them there. I think the other challenge probably, as I joked before, is its own reputation. You know, people tend to think of individuals like Alistair Campbell or others in the mix. And that may be from politics, but it is about spin and, you know, not answering the question or avoiding it. You can you hear it every time a politician does it. My wife complains about it, I do it. Just give me a straight answer out. I said, look, can we just think about the question you just asked me, darling? I'm not clear on what you really want. So I think we have our own sort of identity problem in a way, because we probably do waffle on a bit, and we probably do. It's not as well an exact science. I think that's the other thing as well. That, and this is again, it's my personal reflection. You have to be quite pragmatic. You know, if you've said you're going to do 10 things, because you're dealing with multiple different actors, again, media, politics, you're not going to meet all of those, because there will be unforeseen things that, you know, the media aren't that interested in it, or the politician couldn't be asked, or it's just not a good time to do these things. So if you've got to be pragmatic and say, actually, we know you wanted 10 things, but getting 7 out of 10 is probably the best that you can get. And having the realistic confidence to do that, it takes some guts sometimes. But I do think in the industry, there's people who just will do all 10 for you, because that's what they know that person wants to hear. And it's not about advising to please, it's about advising to help. So,
in the world now, for you, one thing we have is that I give an ideal situation and what we would do for you if money wasn't an issue. Okay, and then you get, but this is, you know, there's a cost involved, but your budget's this. For your budget, I would do, you get most bang for your buck if you do these 3 things, and we'll do them really well, and you'll see the benefit, and then we can take it from there. Is there that kind of pragmatism when it comes to costs and things like that?
Don't get me wrong. There's lots of companies, you know, they want it all. You know, again, looking back in time, because it is about time, and it's about the logistics of coming up with a plan that best suits that company or individual. But if they haven't got the budget, then it's not going to happen, because effectively they're paying for you to do it, and then to use your expertise and you know, time. They always say, why does a plumber cost X amount, but it takes them 5 minutes? Well, it's taken 20 years to get the expertise to do it in 5 minutes. And so it's a bit like that, I think, with with communications people. Particularly if they've got some grey hair, because they've been there and done it a bit more often. And I think that pragmatic sense of business where you'd say, well, okay, you don't want A, B, and C because you can't, there isn't the money for it. That's fine. We'll just have to do A, but we'll have to do it slightly differently. And so that will then put you on a better trajectory long term, or when you have more money, etc. So it came up it came up a lot actually back in the agency days.
Is there one bit of advice that you had from someone, either in agencies or in government, or that you think back on and you go, yeah, he was right, or that you remember the most vividly, that you bring up at parties with friends? I've got loads of anecdotes.
No, I do remember the story. I'd probably tell a few people. Is when I worked in the city, and I remember it wasn't me, but it reminded me that actually relationships with people is a fundamental part of what we do. You know, if you're want to get in the media, if you knowing people, what is it they like and don't like? How do you get on with what's their team? What's their football team? Do they like cricket? Who wouldn't like cricket, obviously? But what is it that motivates them? What is it they don't like? And actually, that meant we worked in the city. What I learned there was that ability to network and lunch in probably a slightly old school way was fundamental. And so I remember there was a story of this guy who I think had been out to lunch with quite a senior journalist. And he came back at about 3 o'clock or 2:30 or something like that. Boss just went apoplectic. What the fuck do you think you're doing here? Well, I've just taken so-and-so. What? Why? Didn't you want drinks? Or, it's probably an old school way of saying, getting drunk, taking them out, have a few beers.
Get to know them.
Because you get to know them. They went apoplectic. Get out there. Don't ever do that again. And so what that installed me, and actually chat to other colleagues there, regardless of background or whatever, they're of the same ilk. It was a bit like, if you want to form a relationship, if you want to spend the time, you've got to invest it. Networking and talking to people takes time. But again, it will build up that sense of knowledge and understanding of the environment in which you operate. And so actually, seeing someone else get bollocked just reminded me that take the time.
Yeah.
Because, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission is another one I've always I said here, which is that, if someone says to you, where were you yesterday afternoon? Well, I was out because I was entertaining so-and-so. No problem. And so you've got to have that, there's a bit of trust there that that's going to be good enough to get you off. And obviously you have been doing that rather than lying and just having a ciggy,
Yeah. I like that. So, sounds like maybe a good place to
finish.
Yeah, I love that though. It's really important. The things I look for people is, can you hold a conversation? Can you talk about, if I do like a 6-month probation, 6 months ago, I just want you to tell me about what we do. And what you do.
Yeah,
let's have a chat. Let's go and have a few drinks.
Exactly, and I think particularly doing what I'm doing up in York, trying to do it in Yorkshire, in the north, so to speak. There are other the traditional PR firms, no problem, great people, but I'm trying to bring a different sense of that work up here. Because if you want to do it, it's all in London. Again, I understandably why it is there, but I think there is that sort of camouflage business network and other people out there that are crying out for stuff like this. 100%. And to your point, it's particularly in the north, as a Kentish lad, the north is a people place. And you don't do hard sells, and you certainly don't do bullshit. So you've got to get to know someone, and that actually makes you, I would say, trying to be better as a human being, but also better at what you do. So.
That's a clip, isn't it?
Did you get that, George? Did you like it? Did I look authentic enough?
It's already done.
Empathy and authenticity are the words.
Yeah. It's brilliant. I really appreciate you coming down from all the way from York to...
No, I don't know. It was a pleasure.
And tell us about what you do, because I think it's quite rare. And there's plenty of work up north that people needing to boost reputation. And
I think there is. I wish they'd find some more. But it's I think it's like that chicken and the egg thing. People want investment in the north, and it will come at some point. But then it's a bit like, but you don't really want to tell anyone because you quite like it the way it is, lad. And they're like, well, you can't have it both ways.
Well, it takes someone to lead it. And so you build it, they'll come.
Yes, Field of Dreams. Kevin Costner, Field of Dreams. Got to watch it, George.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for coming.
No, cheers, buddy.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks again, and really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes.